talk about the global economy and how it's impacting us in the United States as well as others in the rest of the world from a big bird's eye view picture. We live in a capitalist, financialized, neoliberal system. I'll talk more about those words. A capitalist system whose motive is a drive for profit. And the system has to keep creating more goods in order to create more profit in order to survive. And when that breaks down, the system goes into crisis. And we're in a period right now historically where the system is in crisis and trying to figure out strategies to survive. And one of the critical points is that this capitalist system doesn't care how much people and the planet get chewed up and spit out in the process. It's going to keep driving to try to create profit. One of the main points that I want to make today is that there are many fronts of struggle in this system, but that all of those different fronts are different battles in terms of the same system. And so we're going to be more effective as activists and organizers if we understand that the place that we are in struggle is connected to this bigger picture, and we're going to ultimately have to take on the picture as well. So I want to just mention in starting that I'm drawing on the work of some brilliant political economists who've been writing new work about this crisis. Jason Moore and Raj Patel have a new book, A History of the World in 7 Cheap Things. David Harvey's new book, Marx, Capital, and the Madness of Economic Reason. And Harvey is the one that drew this kind of a flow, and I'm adapting it some, and we'll discuss further. And Nancy Fraser, who's done brilliant work on women's unpaid work in the economy. So let's dig right in here and let me tell you a little bit about the way the system works. The main thing is that the system wants cheap labor. It produces things to make a profit, but it needs workers to make stuff. So they're hired by owners, and the workers make stuff using raw materials. And the owners want the labor to be as cheap as possible because they're going to make profit by selling things for more than it costs them to make them. So they try to drive down wages with all sorts of union busting and wage suppression, changes in laws that suppress wages, but also looking for cheap food, because if innovations in food drive down the cost of food, it doesn't cost as much to hire workers. Then they got to get into the marketplace. So here these pink circles are where there's a site of struggle. And here the site of struggle is between workers and owners. But in the marketplace, of course, if they make lots of stuff but don't sell it, they're not going to make the profit. So we get into the whole area of consumption, global trade, the role of advertising, and the need to create needs in order to sell that stuff. There's a lot of castigating us for buying too much and consuming too much, and of course we should not consume more than we need. But the reality is that the system needs to create those needs and needs for us to buy them to keep going. So there's an enormous drive for us to consume. There's an area that's almost hidden in the economy, which is called cheap care. And this I'm drawing on the work of Nancy Fraser and many brilliant feminist economists. People have to show up to work every day, but it's often invisible that when they show up, there's somebody back home who's raising kids, providing health care, putting food on the table, finding a home, making the home, all of that. And that's traditionally been women's unpaid work. And as women have had to move into the workforce, because households need 2 incomes now to survive, increasingly that work is now being done by low-paid immigrant women, providing the care work, at least in developed economies, for very, very low wages. So in both cases, this is work that's undervalued and often invisible. And the site of struggle there is clearly with the system that doesn't recognize that as work, so the need to have it recognized and paid, and with bosses to claim it as valid work. I want to talk about cheap nature. we talked about the need for raw materials. So here the system needs raw materials, and it also spews out waste that it doesn't want to pay for the costs of. It wants cheap energy, cheap land, cheap minerals, and the whole history of colonialism is wrapped up in this drive to get these cheap resources to put into production, and to expand around the globe in order to get them. And to be able to conquer new areas that they haven't had to pay for the real cost of. And so politically, it also means that the capitalists with the state need the power to just take that when they want it. And we've seen a lot of that throughout history. On the other side, they spew out waste. We've got pollution of land, air, and water. We've got climate change, and the havoc that's wreaking, extinctions, and these forces are ones that capital creates, but doesn't want to have to pay the real cost of, and so that cost is shoved onto the rest of us, onto the planet, and onto working people. Cheap money. We're in a time that I refer to as financialization. And what happens is that there can be breakdowns in the system, and it goes into crisis in terms of profitability. If they can't drive wages down far enough, if they can't sell the goods at the price they want, if raw materials start to go up, then the system goes into crisis, and instead it starts creating mechanisms or bubbles to make profit, not by producing something, but through speculation. And we're living in a time right now of intense speculation. So on the one hand, we've got huge amounts of debt